Yo, what's up guys? Right now the metagame on high Pixelborn ladder is all bouncing goats, so if you're looking for a highly competitive deck for a tournament or something, just throw a secondary color with a Merlin Min package and I think you'll be good to go. Preferably red, or maybe even steel. But today, we're going to talk about Discard, which is a deck I've wanted to cover for a while. Besides Mill, Discard was actually the first deck I started working on for Chapter 2, with pretty disappointing results. I think it was because I started with the obvious green-yellow base, and I say it's obvious since yellow has access to You Have Forgotten Me, and everyone's wet dream is turn 3 Prince John, turn 4 You Have Forgotten Me. Turns out though that once you nuke their hand, they just quest with whatever characters they have on board and you just die. At this point, I've played over 150 ladder games with various discard decks, and I've also faced a ton of discards, so I feel like I'm qualified enough at this point to make a video on discard decks for Chapter 2. I think the two best color combos to pair green discard with is Steel and Red. Steel and Red have the best character removal cards. This card's plan is to nuke the opponent's hand from turns 3 to 6, and then you're sort of left with a bunch of dinky little dudes with basically no ability to fight back, just sitting there and watching as your opponent quests to 20. And you've sacrificed around 4 turns of tempo to establish the John or Bucky engine and draw a bunch of cards while making your opponent discard their hand. This means your board is very underdeveloped and weak, and you need to immediately address your opponent's threats on board. Steel and Red address this issue by having the best toolbox to deal directly with characters. Steel has cards like Fire the Cannon, Swords, Tinkerbell Smash, and Red has cards like Lady Tremaine, Maui, and of course, Be Prepared. Be Prepared and Grab Your Swords are especially crucial as your opponent will have started dumping their hand onto the board, and you enter the mid-game with a big hand advantage but little to no board presence, and will usually rely on a mass board wipe to take control of the game from that point. Blue, purple, and yellow all lack significantly in mass board wipe, so they're unable to leverage their card advantage into a win once they've depleted their opponent's hands. I would rank green-yellow as number 3. I was actually working on a weird build with Cinderella 0 to Hero to rush out John on turn 2, but even doing that, it was a bit underwhelming if you didn't have a Hypnotize into a You Have Forgotten Me as a follow-up. Still a really fun deck when it does go off. I've also definitely tried the purple, green, and blue, green discard decks, but it's been a huge pile of garbage, and they're also kind of a work in progress. So Green Steel is probably the most popular Pixelborn ladder deck that I've been running into, but today I want to talk about Green Red Discard, which is my favorite version, and I've been working on this deck for quite some time now, and it's gone through a lot of changes. The core of this deck is obviously the discard action cards. We got Sudden Chill and Hypnotize. Even though discarding cards is a fair 1-for-1 trade with the opponent, it comes at the cost of losing a full turn of tempo to play, and sacrificing a turn of development onto the board. So we got Prince John, of course, to power up all our discards to a completely unfair state where then it becomes 2-for-1s. Now, we don't want to just auto-lose the game if we don't get a turn 3 John, so we're going to be playing 4 Buckies as well. He turns all your Floodborns into 2-for-1s by making your opponent discard. If John is out there as well, now it becomes a 3-for-1. This is the core engine of the discard deck. So we gotta look at some Floodborns to activate Bucky. Lady Tremaine is an obvious one, has board presence when played, is Floodborn, and is a built-in 2-for-1. Probably Red's best card of Chapter 2. With Bucky and John, she becomes a 4-for-1, which is just insane value on a card. We also have Donald Duck, and this guy is a beast. Yes, he draws your opponents a card, but he does this on your turn, which means you're likely going to make them discard the card they just drew. Which means if you have Prince John, Donald Duck draws you another card off your opponent's discard. This means he draws you 2 extra cards per turn, and your opponent gets nothing. A lot of opponents who have played against my deck have accepted his ability to draw the extra card, but then they quickly realize that I just make them discard, and so they need to start declining against me when their hand's empty. This guy closes out games super fast with card advantage with this ability. Then we have Flynn Rider. This guy's a natural for discard decks. He closes out games super fast after you've nuked their hand, so playing him and 4 1-drop Flynn Riders is a must. I only play 3 of him though because of uninkability issues. I want to mention that I don't play the 2-drop Flynn Riders as they don't actually synergize with the main objective of the deck. Shift Flynn Rider can shift for only 2 ink, which is incredibly relevant when you think about how the deck builds its tempo. Turn 1 Flynn Rider, turn 2 Bucky, and turn 3 John are fairly common starts. Turn 4, shifting Flynn Rider to trigger Bucky, and then being able to also sing or cast Sudden Chill is extremely relevant. Playing the 2-drop Flynn Rider disrupts this tempo significantly, as you want the Bucky to synergize with 4-drop Flynn Rider, and they take up the same turn 2 tempo slot. Also, no one's going to attack your Flynn Rider to trigger the discard ability until their hand is depleted, and your deck is not an aggressive deck. It's a control deck, so questing early on with Flynn Rider doesn't really help you out that much. He also just dies to Teeth, which is rampant in the metagame. So yeah, I chose not to play 2-drop Flynn Rider. Then we have Evasive Minnie Mouse and Daisy Duck. The more I play with Minnie Mouse, the more I really like her. I actually think she's performed far better than Daisy Duck for me. Daisy Duck not being a Floodborn means she doesn't do anything on turn 4 when she comes out. She has to quest to get value, and that also means no challenging early board characters for board control. Minnie Mouse has an immediate impact to your discard engine the turn she comes into play, and she's also free to control the board a bit by challenging some of your opponent's 2-health characters while staying alive, and the fact that she's evasive means she can stay alive after challenging or sing Sudden Chill safely. If you compare the cards Minnie Mouse and Flynn Rider, they actually are very similar in being 2/3s and evasive and shift 2s, and they play very similar roles. I would certainly consider in the future to up my Minnie Mouse counts in the deck and possibly cutting down on my Daisy Ducks. Finally, I'm also playing 2 big Floodborn Aladdins. He's a really nice game closer for the endgame. I was playing Baby Aladdin to supplement the 3 ink slot, as John is our only 3 ink character drop. But I was taking in and out the Baby Aladdins depending on how the aggro meta looked like. So yeah, that's around 16 Floodborns in the deck, which should give Bucky plenty of cards to trigger off of. My favorite addition to this deck when making it was actually Improvise. This card is always useful for early ink, and it helps you dig deeper early on to try and draw that Bucky or John. Because Improvise replaces itself, you can actually find incredible value from it off of a Flynn Rider. I also run Teeth and Ambitions, but if you've noticed by now, the purple metagame all seem to have 3 toughness. For this reason, I'm also running Donald Duck, as he becomes a 3/3 with Improvise, which allows him to trade very favorably with the early game meta. And he can also absorb a Teeth and survive. He can also shift into green Donald Duck, and sings pretty well with a 3 HP body. Turn 2 Donald into turn 3 Prince John, and having Donald sing a Sudden Chill immediately is a very nice line. So with the Flynn Riders, Donald Ducks, Improvise, and Teeth, this deck addresses its extremely weak early game. If I add another Minnie Mouse to my deck, I might also try to fit 1 or 2 more 1-drop minis as well. Once you start nuking their hand at the cost of board development, you'll need a way to come back. 4 Mauis are a must-have in the deck, as all your discard development happens by turn 3 to 4, and as a 5-drop, he fits perfectly into the curve, and with Rush, he tempos you back into the game quite nicely. Of course, we're going to be running 4 Be Prepared as well. This will ensure that your opponent not only has no hand, he'll also have no board. And with Lady Tremaines and Maleficent Dragons as follow-up to Be Prepared, an opponent who will be in top deck mode at that point is going to be in a world of hurt. So yeah, the main gameplay objective of this deck is basically early on use your Improvise and Teeth package alongside your Donald Duck and Flynn Riders to battle for super early game. Establish your Bucky and John discard and draw engine, and let it kick in from turns 4 to 6, and nuke their hand while replenishing yours. Once you've nuked the opponent's hand and loaded up on yours, clear the board with a Be Prepared, or just use Mauis and Tremaines and quest to victory. Now, I would say the Bucky John discard engine has 4 major weaknesses. The first one is its early and mid game are pretty weak at establishing board control, but we have addressed it somewhat by using Improvise and Teeth packages, along with Maui and possibly Lady Tremaines to follow up. The second weakness is that it's incredibly strong going first and very bad going second, as discard is a very tempo-oriented strategy. And we just addressed this by winning our coin flips. Thirdly, it's extremely weak to steal, especially Steel Song. Bucky and John are basically immortal, except facing a Grab Your Swords or a Tinkerbell Shift for Bucky. We can address this by promoting Popsicle decks to push the Steel Song out of the meta, so we can swoop in and farm all the Popsicle decks. But yeah, against Steel, you're not going to have a good time if they get an early Swords. And the fourth weakness is purple. Even though discard in theory should be a natural counter to control type decks, the Merlin Min bounce package along with Friends on the Other Side, Maleficent, and even Yzma have way too much card draw, and they draw cards while developing their board. Unfortunately, I foresee that this will be the state of Lorcana for set 2, and with the overtuning of the purple bounce package and the prevalence of purple decks, I think discard will be very unlikely to hit tier 1 status. But it's definitely a fun deck to play, so I still suggest trying it out. Finally, before we get into some gameplay, I'll add some thoughts about some other cards that the deck has played or might play. So this deck has gone through a lot of changes. My initial deck list actually ran Bippity Boppity Boo engine and would bounce red and green Tremaines as well as Lucifers. If you look at those cards though, there's a glaring problem, and that's uninkability. When it did go off, it was pretty godly, but the deck was so inconsistent that I had to drop all that bouncing nonsense for more consistency, although I had to sacrifice some of its explosiveness. And that's why Lucifer didn't make the cut into the deck. For the 3-drop slot, you can also consider Fat Mickey along with his shift form. 3/4s are very strong in this metagame. And also turn 5 is usually reserved for Maui, but a shift Mickey may be a nice supplemental role for that 5 ink tempo slot. My original list also played Queen and Queen Shift, but I found a 2 HP body in this meta was really bad, and I wasn't able to play my teeth on my Rush Queen without it dying. Big Queen, even though she's a Floodborn, just didn't hold up to Maui's board presence, so I ditched the Queen package. And Belle is just trash and probably the most overrated card from set 2. I didn't even bother testing her, but maybe she could be good. Uninkable though, so probably won't make the cut. And finally, John Silver is a card I've considered playing, but have yet to test. He comes with a really nice added bonus of being able to name the deck A Lady and Her Johns. Alright, let's hop into some gameplay and commentary to see how red-green discard holds up in the meta. So our deck relies on Bucky and John, so you want to mulligan extremely aggressively for those. I normally keep one card and then send 6 to find Bucky or John if I don't have them in my opener. A full send 7 is also not too uncommon. In this hand, we start with a John so we can keep our Flynn, Teeth, Improvise, and Maui as well. We're going second, which is unfortunate, and we're also against red-purple, which I think is usually favored around like 60 to 65% against us. If we're lucky, we can Teeth a Pinocchio or something on turn 2 and kill Pascal with Flynn Rider. Dropping our Bucky turn 2 isn't too important with this hand, as we don't really have a Floodborn to trigger with him. Our opponent drops a Snake, bouncing Pascal, and so we go ahead and start inking our early game cards like Improvise and put out our Bucky. Our opponent sees that we're playing discard, so now he needs to start spamming his card draws like Friends and Rabbits and Maleficents. He plays a Friends on turn 3, and on my turn 3, I drop a John. And now I have a window of about 4 turns before he can get a Be Prepared off. So 4 turns to nuke his hand and load up mine. He plays a Rabbit and draws a card, and I cast Hypnotize, gaining a 3/1 on my turn. He's actually refilled his hand to a decent amount, so I decide to ink my Donald Duck for now, as he's far better against a depleted hand. My turn 5 will most likely skip the Maui and go straight to Hypnotize Sudden Chill or Prince John Sudden Chill. He plays another Rabbit, and I feel like his lore pressure isn't too bad, so I go with a greedier John play to draw 2 cards off my Sudden Chill. On his turn, he continues to draw cards by playing Maleficent and bouncing his Rabbit after questing. He's at 8 lore, and I could Hypnotize, which would be a 4/1, but Lady Tremaine is a 5/1 and also plays a defensive role. I could be playing right into a Be Prepared though. Turn 6 to 7 against red-purple is always very tricky because you're trying to figure out if they're going to have the Be Prepared or not. I think that from personal experience, you sort of just shrug and say if they have it, they have it, and just play into it. I think I've lost more games from attacking in on turn 6 predicting a turn 7 Be Prepared than when they didn't actually have it. Luckily, my opponent doesn't have the Be Prepared on his turn 7, and it's time to put the finishing blows on his hand. I start with a Hypnotize and draw 3 cards off of it. I find a Bucky. I play a Bucky and shift Flynn, and this is absolutely devastating to my opponent. I get 2 triggers from shifting Flynn off my Bucky, and draw another 2 cards off John. In addition, I can sing a Sudden Chill. Even though I went second, in combination with my opponent not having the turn 7 be prepared, and me drawing the top 10% of my draws with my deck, I got very lucky to win this game against Red-Purple. I decide to sing with my Bucky as I've drawn my last 2, and use my Flynn Rider to take out a Maleficent. Despite me having drawn near top of my range in this game, Red-Purple still managed to get to 11 lore and put on some pretty good pressure. My opponent is still unable to find a Be Prepared, and with multiple Bucky triggers and my Floodborns coming in, my opponent decides it's time to throw in the towel. So this is a showcase of what needs to happen for you to beat Red-Purple, as despite all my discards, he was able to somehow keep up with his draws while maintaining some board advantage right up until the end of mid-game and early endgame. Again, Red-Purple is a pretty bad matchup for this deck. I'd estimate against a good player, you're looking to win around 30 to 35% of your games. Next up, we have Yellow Steel, which is also a poor matchup for this deck, although not as terrible as Red-Purple in my opinion. I think you're maybe around 40% against it. Even though their whole new worlds negate the discard work you've put in onto their hand, getting a full new 7 cards with this deck isn't too bad, as you're running Be Prepareds, and Red's endgame is one of the best ones in the game, with magnificent dragons and Tremaines and stuff. So in this game, we're on the play against Philo, who's playing Lantern Steel Song, and we have a John start, but no early game Flynn Rider. Flynn Rider 1-drop is actually super important to disrupt their early game flow with Teeth in this matchup, as Lantern Steel has a lot of 2/2 characters that can be taken out with Teeth. I ink Teeth here as seeing I don't have a 2-drop Donald or Flynn Rider in hand, and maybe want to cast Improvise on turn 2 on his 1-drop to dig deeper into my deck. He drops a Queen, and I go ahead and improvise his Queen and draw into a Bucky, which really sucks, cause I was 1 turn tempo too slow. He does end up shifting Queen on turn 2. This game would have been completely different if I got the turn 1 Flynn and Teeth off on the Queen. My deck continues to mock me as I draw a red Donald 2 turns too late as well. I decide to draw Bucky instead of John here in case he wants to swords with his Queen. I also like to get immediate value out of John by playing him and casting Sudden Chill on the same turn, so this would require me to do this on turn 5. I can play Minnie Mouse to trigger Bucky on turn 4. He casts Ariel and finds a sword, which is bad news for me, but hopefully I can get it out of his hand by at least provoking him with a Bucky trigger. I think it's possible that Green Donald is the better Floodborn to play here, as he has more toughness, but I ended up going with Minnie Mouse. He sings Storm Rages On and swords to clear my board. Now I'm having more regrets about not playing the Donald Duck. I have a really unfortunate draw as I draw another uninkable John, and I decide to get my Maui out and ink the Sudden Chill. Another big mistake. I don't think this is the correct decision, as I'm very close to playing Be Prepared, so I think John with Sudden Chill to get his last card, which has a high chance of being a whole new world, is much better. Then I just need to survive 2 turns to wipe his board. So I definitely feel like this was a huge misplay by me. So he was holding on to a Stitch last turn, which we should have taken out with our Sudden Chill John play. I draw another uninkable and missed my critical turn 6 ink drop. Me not playing Donald Duck earlier may have also screwed me. All my small decisions over the game are actually going to end up costing me what seems to be a winnable game by me. He ends up wheeling, and we wheel into a Be Prepared, but unfortunately, missing that ink on turn 6 won't allow me to play Be Prepared on this critical turn 7. I teeth sack my John as I'm ready to play Be Prepared on the following turn to slow down his lore count. He quests to 17, and now it's time to play Be Prepared and take back control of the game with my dragons and Aladdin and Teeth. Yo guys, if I end up making a comeback here, you guys gotta give this video a like and subscribe. You're all here for the epic Zefa top decks and comebacks, but I want to earn the subs with great gameplay. So, this is it. I go to ink my Daisy Duck and wipe his board. And, Bruh. I accidentally mouse slip and drop her onto the board. Bam. Always keeping my viewers on their toes. So, yeah. Swords is a pretty bad matchup for you, but Wheel is not as awful as it may seem on paper. Wheel has to go wide to try and kill you, but if they don't, they just get picked apart by Maui, Lady Tremaines, and Maleficent Dragons. If they do go wide, then you take control with Be Prepared. I'd say 59-41 in favor of Steel Song for this matchup. Finally, I want to cover the Popsicles matchup, which I think is an amazing matchup for this deck, as that deck exerts almost no early game pressure. I'm going first this game, and I have the ultimate Bucky John start. He plays Annoy, and has a fast one-jump ramp start, which is actually a double-edged sword. On one hand, you can ramp and dump your hand quickly against discard, but on the other hand, dumping your cards so early into the game to ramp will leave you vulnerable to discard from turns 4 to 6. I get a Daisy Duck on turn 4, which he casts Let It Go on. I play Flynn Rider and sing Sudden Chill to completely destroy his hand, and my opponent simply concedes soon afterwards, as he doesn't want to play from this position. Since that game was such a blowout, I'll cover another Popsicles game where it's much closer. In this game, we're going second, and we very aggressively mulligan for a Bucky or John while keeping Teeth Flynn Rider, and we end up getting both. Here we're up against Pho QC, who's an excellent blue-purple player in Chapter 1, but for this chapter it seems he's moved on to blue-red Popsicles. We're very happy to see him ink Tamatoa at turn 1, as it's one of our best matchups. Teeth is pretty bad in this matchup, so I go ahead and ink it and skip on playing Flynn Rider, as I'd rather have him for ink. I just go ahead and set up a Bucky and John on turn 2 and 3. Red-Blue has no way of dealing with these guys unless they ramp out a Lady Tremaine or Be Prepared. He knows we're playing discard, so he quickly dumps his hand and ramps up very wisely, choosing not to draw with Hiram. Pho QC is a very smart player. I drop another John and basically say, hey, if you top deck Be Prepared, then so be it. He sacks his Fishbone to his questing Hiram on his turn and is unable to play his hand out fully. He chooses to play Nick and Mother Gothel, skipping his ink. In any case, I have a bit of a decision on my turn on whether to Maui Crush his Hiram, shutting down his draw engine, or taking that last card out of his hand. Since I have a Be Prepared in hand, I decide to get that last card out of his hand and draw 3 cards. I can set up for a Be Prepared and take control of the game with my huge card advantage. On my next turn, I decide to play Lady Tremaine to force him to discard his last card again, and to reduce his next turn lore potential before everything dies to Be Prepared. I sack my Bucky to kill his grandma, which should signal to him that I'm setting up for a Be Prepared, and I also quest with John. Again, Pho reads this correctly and just quests on his turn, ignoring my John. He also keeps a card in hand, as he knows unless I have a Sudden Chill, I can't both discard and play Be Prepared on the same turn. On my turn, I decide actually this board state isn't too bad. I have a lot of cards in my hand, and if I'm willing to sacrifice my John to Be Prepared, then I'm definitely willing to sacrifice him to team up with Lady Tremaine and take out his Nick. I play Maui to take out his Lady Tremaine, and I can take full board control without playing Be Prepared, and the prerogative will be on him to play Be Prepared now. So my Maui goes ahead and takes out his Lady Tremaine, and my Prince John and Lady Tremaine goes ahead and takes out his Nick Wild. He would have definitely played an item last turn if he had it, so as long as I dodge an item top deck from him, his Hiram shouldn't come into play. I play a Bucky out and pass. Now this is actually a big mistake in this matchup because you want to be holding onto your Buckies and Prince Johns until you can get a guaranteed trigger off them. On his turn he does punish me and plays Be Prepared, and I regret playing the Bucky. I play Flynn Rider and hold back Donald in case I need to Dragon. He plays a Lady Tremaine getting rid of my Flynn Rider, and then I draw into a Hypnotize. I have another tricky decision on my turn. I can either remove his immediate threat on board with my dragon, or I can Hypnotize, removing a future threat from his hand while also drawing a card. I decide to draw the card and save the dragon for next turn, or if he plays another big character threat out, I can just clear with Be Prepared. I drop Donald Duck as I feel like my endgame is superior to his and the remainder of my deck is much more threat and removal dense than his. On his turn, he ends up only drawing into a Grandma Tala, which he plays. I dragon his Lady Tremaine and I sing out a Sudden Chill with my Duck. He top decks a Nick Wild, and the game is getting a little bit dicey with him being at 17 lore. But I can keep building my card advantage with Hypnotize Donald Duck, and I have Be Prepared to clear the board. I decide I can still win if I allow Nick to get him to 19 lore, and I double improvise my dragon after taking out Grandma with my Duck, and I go ahead and drop Flynn Rider. I'll have a Sudden Chill for his next Donald Duck draw. He drops a Mother Gothel on board, presenting lethal, but unfortunately for him, I have a Teeth as an answer. I Sudden Chill out the last card in his hand, and Teeth my Flynn and Gothel, and then I kill Nick with my dragon. I play Daisy Duck, making Donald Duck draw completely useless for him. I have a Sudden Chill here and Daisy to get rid of both cards in his hand, and he realizes his position is lost from this point and concedes the game. Although this game didn't really demonstrate it, red-green discard against Popsicles sometimes has to play extremely slow and control-based. A lot of times you have to just sit back with a John or Bucky in hand and just pass and say go until they initiate something. Something that you've seen from my mistake earlier that I forgot to do. I actually think the Popsicles matchup is about 70 to 80% in favor of red-green discard. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this gameplay and deck breakdown. I've actually gotten a lot of requests for this deck, as many of you have seen me play it on either Ladder or on Ducky's stream, so go ahead and build on the ideas with your own twists. Or if you want to have extra fun, try the Bibbidi Boppity Boo version with Lady Tremaines and Lucifer Bounce variants. If red's not your thing, definitely give green steel or green yellow discard a try, while I keep attempting to brew a viable blue or purple based discard deck. And as always, thanks for watching.